Hey, and welcome back to Riley's Library. Today I'm going to be telling you some of the top books that made me cry. If you're like me, you like to cry when you read. And these are not the only books that made me cry, but these are ones that made me cry pretty hard and are sad books. So I'm going to rank them from, we'll start at the one I cried the least at and go all the way to the one that made me cry the most, and I'll explain without spoilers why they made me cry so hard. Again, my camera is still broken, so I'm filming on my phone. Might not be the best quality. I'm trying. It's what I have, so it's what we're working with. So if you're interested in some sad books, just keep watching. Okay, so I have 9 books that I'm going to talk about that made me cry. I'll tell you the plot, and I'll kind of tell you on a scale of 1 to 5 how hard I cried. Okay, so the first book is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. I don't know, I'm sorry. This basically is about a girl who, her boyfriend dies and she starts getting phone calls from him, and she talks to him over the phone. It was pretty sad, but out of all these books, it was low on my list of tears. I know some people cried a lot more. My dogs are coming in my room. But I would give this like a 2 out of 5 tears because, it made me cry, but I just kind of teared up. It was sad, but it wasn't like a knee-jerk, I'm sobbing my eyes out kind of sad, but it did get me, because it does deal with grief and someone trying to deal with the passing of a loved one, and it's a YA, so I think they're in high school, maybe just graduated high school, and she's dealing with the death of her boyfriend. So it is sad, but it was good. It made me cry like 2 out of 5 tears. We'll use Kim K crying for the rating, but 2 out of 5 Kims. Next up, we have Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I could put most of Colleen Hoover's books on this list, but this one probably got me the best. This follows our main character, Kenna, who is in jail. She had a baby in jail, and she's finally out, and she's trying to reconnect with her daughter, and dealing with the death of her daughter's father, things like that. I'm gonna give this like a 3 out of 5 crying Kims for the crying scale here. It was pretty sad, but I've cried worse at books. Okay. But it is a pretty good book. It's not sad overall in the ending, but there are sad moments, and I did cry in this book. The next 2 are by the same author. The first one is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I will also give this a 3 out of 5 crying Kims. So this follows Daisy Jones and the Six as a band. It's interview style. Most people already know what this is about, but when you get to the end and this major plot twist happens, it just made me cry for some reason. Not in the like I'm so depressed and hurt kind of cry, but like it was kind of sad. So I did cry more than probably Reminders of Him, because I was emotional when I read this at like 2 in the morning. It's not the saddest book ever, but it did make me cry. The next book is also by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I will give this a 4 out of 5 crying Kims because this one hit me hard. I cried 3 different times. I read this at like 3 in the morning. I was sobbing, and I literally was just talking to the walls like, what the heck? The entire time. So this follows Evelyn Hugo, who is a movie star, Hollywood actress, and her 7 husbands that she is with. Each section is a different husband, and just her story of rising to fame and how she got there. She goes through a lot of really crappy things to get where she is. But I cried at multiple sections of this book. You will probably cry if you read this book. Next up, we have Pack Up the Moon by Kristen Higgins. This is a sad book. The whole point of this book is that it is sad. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 crying Kims as well. I cried, but not like a ton. So essentially, Josh and Lauren are married. Lauren has, I think, terminal cancer. And so in the beginning, it's like setting up for her dying. They have some like flashbacks to when they were married and how they fell in love, and then some afters. She essentially leaves letters for Josh once they, I think it's Josh. Yeah, for Josh. Once they, she dies, with tasks every month for him to do to help him get over her. And there's just this little connection at the end that when you realize it, it made me cry. Like, this is sad. At first, I didn't think I was going to cry because it is sad throughout the whole thing. It doesn't like hit you at once. Like, you just know it's sad, so you kind of prepared yourself for it. But towards the end there is this little plot twist that wrecked me, and I cried a good bit, but I've still cried worse at books. Next up, we have Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. Most people have read this book or know what it's about. We have essentially our main character. What is her name? I can't even remember. Bree. Our main character's name is Bree. And she moves to this town. She's got some secrets and she meets Archer Hale. He is silent. He doesn't talk. And he's kind of an outcast. And she starts to like form a relationship with him. There's this one part in this book that I did sob quite a lot. I'm going to still give it a 4 out of 5 Kims because I've still cried worse. But it's one of those things, like, if you keep reading, like, you should just keep reading, but you start crying, so you don't want to keep reading. It's sad at parts, but overall, I mean, it ends up happy. But this book got me. It really did. And it was so good. I love their relationship. All right, then now we're getting into my 5 out of 5 crying Kims. So we have The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. This is the last book in the Poppy War trilogy, which basically is about war. It follows our main character who is from a very poor district, but she tests into the highest school you can test into, which is basically like a military school. And it follows war and death and destruction and all these terrible things that happens throughout her time. The ending of this book, I was not prepared for. This book has ruined my life. I think about it a lot. And then there's also a bonus like chapter story in the very back that also made me sob. I stared at the wall after this blankly. I made my friend read this. She sobbed. She was angry that I made her read it because it literally ruins your life. But it is also one of the best series. It was my number 1 for 2022. So I definitely recommend you read it. But just know that when you finish this book, you are going to be wrecked. And you're not ready for what they're going to do. All right, the next book, also a 5 out of 5 crying Kims, is The Kite Runner. This book basically follows 2 boys in Afghanistan pre-Taliban. One of them is very rich and the other one is the son of the rich kid's family servant. And so one of them is poor, one of them is rich. It's their friendship. Some really terrible things happen pre-Taliban. And then eventually he moves to America, and later on he has to come back to Afghanistan to take care of some things, and that's post-Taliban, which is also pretty rough. I was sobbing, crying, angry, like ugly crying, and I have videos of myself just screaming about how I needed this person to get their crap together quickly because I couldn't handle it anymore. It wrecked me. I cried a lot reading this book, but I also think it is a very good book. And I definitely recommend you read it. But just know there are a lot of sad things. And also check trigger warnings because there are some triggering things in this book as well. But it is definitely worth the read. I cried a lot. Okay, and the last one, which is 5 out of 5 crying Kims for me as well, is not inherently a good book. I did enjoy it, but it does read like Wattpad a little bit. The writing is not great. But the fact that I cried the entirety of this book is why I like it so much. And it is A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. Obviously, when she's little, her grandmother says, keep a jar and keep 1,000 boy kisses. And so every time she gets kissed, she'll write it and she puts it in the jar. And it's about this couple who they start being a thing when they're like 8 and it continues on. He moves away and then he comes back one day. This, I really can't say much more without spoiling it, but this, I started crying at like the halfway point and I didn't stop crying, and it was one of those things where I was like, you know what I'm talking about when you're like crying so hard you can't breathe? That was me when I read this book. It was like I can't see the pages. I have a headache and my eyeballs are swollen after I finished this book, and it was like the halfway point on. My friend just read this and I know she started sobbing at like 39%. Like she cried the entirety of this book. It is a very sad book, and the writing style is not great. Like, it's not great writing, but it is definitely great if you want to cry. If you are thinking to myself, I really need a nice little cathartic moment and let some cry out that's not about my own personal issues. That's why I like crying at books so much, because sometimes I read sad books purely to cry because I don't want to cry about my own life, but I will gladly cry about something that's not real and let the tears out and the emotion out. If that's what you are looking for, pick this book up, because I guarantee you will sob like a little baby. And it's probably going to hurt a lot, but it lets the emotions out. 5 out of 5 crying Kims. I've never cried harder at a book than I've cried at this book right here. So if you need a good cry, some of these are not inherently sad books, but they did make me cry. I have more books that I have cried out. Babel made me cry, just not a ton, but I did cry at Babel. There are other books that I have cried at, but these are books that just, if I think of a book that made me cry, one of these is going there. Like, that's what I think of when I think of, oh, that book made me cry. If you want a book to cry, this is what I'm recommending. So if you're looking for something like that, definitely pick one of these books up. They're all pretty good books, so I definitely recommend all of them, but just get some tissues and be prepared. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!